Hey YouTube, we're going to be doing a full-length video on this set of knives. This is my SRK clone. I'm thinking of calling it the SRS. We'll see if the name catches on. So in terms of cost for manufacturing, these are easier to make. These are quite a bit easier. They're more material efficient. They use a lot less metal than those knives. Balance is right here at the point, especially for a time you could get them in steels like 3V. Also, when you buy a knife from a company, they typically have some type of warranty, so you have someone to go to if there's an issue with the knife. That may or may not be covered depending on the company, but that is an advantage. And if you were just making one knife or buying one knife on the consumer end, it's not a big deal. But when I was a poor high school student, I didn't have money for something like this, so I decided to make one. This is the first knife that I made. I really like it. It's sentimental more than anything else. There's a couple of things that are kind of tough about this knife that I don't do anymore in my later versions. The advantage to having something like this is it has a full tang knife that protects the handle and spine. I've seen SRKs that have been used to baton, and they actually blow out the Criton handle here. The rubberized handle will just disintegrate if it's hit too many times with a log. So if batoning's your thing, this might be more your pace. Also, it has a proper integral guard, and this protects your hand in cutting, stabbing, sliding up on the blade, whatever you may need. It's not the most comfortable thing against your finger, but it's a different school of thought in terms of safety. A bruised knuckle is a little different than if your hand slips up over the blade. Not that there's a problem with this. This guard is sufficient. The handle's very grippy. But say this were to come into contact with something harder than it, like a piece of wood, it could damage the Criton handle. You could get a little bit of play. There's no risk of that with these knives. So a few of the things that kind of make this a good example of like one of my earlier knives and one of my my first of this line is it's got a couple of little machining marks here with the Dremel. This was very rough, the profile of the knife. So you can see the glue seams where the wood meets the handle. It's not flush or even. Also, I did this, I called it a tiger stripe jimping at the time, and where I wore down with the file onto the flat of the blade, and I don't do that anymore. At the time I thought it was pretty cool, but it's kind of like a new knife maker experiment. The good example is my sharpening game wasn't what it is now. You can kind of see a wrinkle right there where the grind doesn't match up. I didn't have a proper belt grinder, so this is, I guess you would call a full or a mid-convex grind. This is bowed, and then there's pretty much no relief edge. And then the back of this is sharpened. Comes to a very thin tip. Now the good parts of the knife is this knife was made out of 440C and it was cryoed, and it has an ebony blackwood handle that took a really nice polish. So it's made out of really good material, and I did that on the advice of a knife maker, is try to buy the nicest materials you can early because at the very least, if you end up with something cool, it'll be made to last, even though the craftsmanship is a little, is still in development. Is a good way to say that. So my second knife, this is both the second and the fourth knife in the series. So it really belongs here and here. The original had a curly maple handle that was too short. It was about that much shorter on the back because I wanted a skull crusher. As I learned, that doesn't leave a lot for the handle to actually use the knife. So I busted those off, bead blasted the tang as an experiment. I reground the blade. I put a moderate clip on it. Some people call it a swedge, but where you still get a significant amount of thickness on the tip of the knife. So A2 cryoed, because at the time that was the thing. That was before there were a lot of these super steels out, what a lot of people advocated for was cryoing generic air hardening steels, and even cryoing carbon steels. So both of these I had professionally heat treated by a company that does that kind of thing. And you can see I made the guard a little broader so it really gets over that knuckle. And then the handle's much more square. The lines are a lot cleaner. Pretty crisp spine. Very fine relief edge. And a fairly steep grind. Another advantage of having like a wider blade is you can kind of go for a steeper knife. So it'd be better at shearing, better at cutting, and you can get a more gradual angle towards the spine. So that's my, I guess, version 2 and 3. Now this is version 3, and I gotta say, aesthetically, I probably like this knife the most. I built this to match a gun that I have. So the blued finish, the walnut, the stainless steel pins, those are all to match a gun that I have and occasionally take out to the range. You can see it has a more aggressive looking tip and a much thinner swedge, false edge. It's not sharp because it turns out double-edged knives are kind of a headache. And then the tip was damaged in the first set of testing I did. The very tip, the sharpened part of the tip, not the spine of the tip. So I might be revisiting this aggressive point. I can do an entire video just on this knife, and I may. It's a grafted piece of walnut from a different part of the blank. I wanted to kind of steer into the skid. I chipped the handle while I was pushing the pins in, and at the time, rehandling a knife seemed like a lot of work. So I elected to carve it out real carefully with a chip carving knife and chisel. And then a little bit of wood glue, and a little bit of patience. It actually is really nice. So blued blade, walnut handle. This is 52-100, so this is what most people would consider a straight up carbon steel. And this thing is tough. It takes a very fine edge due to its low wear resistance. And I use this process recommended by the Knife Nerd's website, which DET cycling, and the DET cycling for this makes quite a difference. It's probably a difference in about, at least in my own experiment, at least 3 or 4 Rockwell, and I can show you how I test for that some other time if there's interest in it. And then the other beauty of these knives over an SRK is each of these is kind of a little bit of a work of art, right? I could see these knives years from now, and it's like, oh, my fingerprints are all over this knife. The individual like hand craftsmanship is pretty clear, and it's pretty apparent that it's like, yeah, since I redid this knife, you can kind of see how I've gotten better and better at making each one. So the current size template would probably be something like a 7-inch blade, and like a 4.5-inch handle, more or less. 4.5 inches is a very generous sized handle, but I do have kind of medium sized hands, so I think 4.5 inches would accommodate people with larger hands as well. I'm still on the fence between whether to use tool steel or stainless steel, but that's the fun part of knife making. Alrighty, thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I hope to make more videos.